me get the mic on. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to our session today. We did one. This is the second in the space of a week. We did a session last week which introduced everyone to the concepts that we wanted to show in this session. And today's is going to be a much more fast-paced session where we are going to get really into coding with the ThingWorks platform and building our fleet management dashboard. So today will be a lot more about, I use the term coding very loosely because as you'll see, the interface that we use does not require much code, but it will be a lot simpler with that. Okay, I'm just doing a quick mic and video check just to make sure everything's all right. Okay, great. Okay, so I was hoping we might have somebody joining us, but I think we can just get on with our session straight away. Okay, so first of all, just to get everyone into the scheme of things, let me just go back to where we are and what we've done so far. Most of you, like if you were there last time, you would have actually used the server that the online server that we put up. And I'm going to show you that in a bit. But before we do that, let me just give you a quick word on, we are using the Zoom webinar format. So the Zoom webinar format allows, is slightly different from a meeting format. So you're going to see that in our session. It allows for us to control, like, okay, all the participants can see the video, but you won't be able to come on screen until we promote you. So it's slightly more of a one-sided platform. But it helps for sessions like this where we want you to follow along without getting necessarily disturbed by other attendees, cross-posting or things like that. Of course, there are still ways for you to interact with us, and you can definitely see on the bottom of your screen, there are two options there called Q&A and polls. We've also put up a special poll. We wanted to get your feedback on the timing of the session. We've chosen for the last two sessions to do it on a weekday and starting at 5 o'clock, but we also wanted to get your feedback on whether it might be preferable to do it on our regular assembly sessions, the Saturday sessions, where we do it usually on midday. So that's the choice. You just have to see whichever suits you better. And then based on that, you can just reply on the poll. The other important section there is the Q&A section. If you have any questions, please feel free to speak to us and just ask questions there. We'll try to get around to as many questions as possible, but in case we don't, we'll try to answer as many as we can. So just have a look at the Q&A section and see what you can answer. We do have our other co-hosts, Diane and Amar. Let me just make sure I've got Amar as a co-host. Yes, so Diane and Amar from the assembly are on there, and they will definitely help you out, answering your questions as well as promoting you when necessary. Okay, so just to let me bring up, let's go back over, and we're not going to do too much of PowerPoint today, but I am going to share my screen so that you can just get a look at that. I can probably turn off my sound. Okay. Right, just a quick little bit about the assembly for those of you who have not followed us in the past, who are seeing us for the first time. We're a smart lab and makerspace that's based out of In5. I'm not at In5 right now, but we are shooting from here. But In5 has been our home since 2014, and every week it's been a habit at In5 that we've been doing workshops. Of course, until COVID hit, we were doing in-person workshops, but we've made the switch after that to present workshops online as well, and then the show has gone on in that straight. We have assembly hack, assembly code, and assembly data science workshops. Those are the three broad classifications that we use. Hack relates more to embedded systems and IoT and hardware, where there is a bit of physical hardware that is involved. Normally, our IoT workshops would come under assembly hack, where we would be playing with Raspberry Pis and things like that. And you definitely have the ability to play around with that hardware as well as working with the system behind. But this one comes more under our code section, which is purely software and API, where you don't really need external devices. We are going to be working solely with the platform. We will simulate hardware, but it will be primarily working all on your own laptop in there. We've also got a data science stream, which is for AI and ML, and you can see you can definitely catch up on that too. I mean, that is of course the hot topic these days, and we try to do a bit more catered to people who are more advanced data scientists, not necessarily expert level, but people who have some background. Our audience ranges from students to professionals to entrepreneurs, so we get all ages. We don't restrict to anyone. We don't deter anyone who is interested in technology, whether they use it professionally or not. Of course, many of them are professional technologists who are members of our community. We focus on practical applications, so we keep trying to build something rather than just doing theory topics. You can sign up for our forum and you'll get all the updates on there, as well as all our future workshops. The usual workshops are on Saturday, and we've got one coming up this Saturday. You can find us on social media as well at Make Smart Things. Okay, so let's get started. I'm just going to stop my share quickly. Okay, where we have to go with this, let me share my other screen for you. Now, there are a few different ways we are going to access the platform today. And this is one option, as mentioned, and we did also give some advance notice to people that we said, okay, you don't have to install anything. What you have to do is you have to go to developer.thingworks and sign up for a free trial from there. I'm just going to copy it and come back to chat. By the way, from time to time, I will put up chat messages. Chat is, you might not all, and I will send any key crucial messages towards there. So if you go to this site, you can actually get a trial version of the PTC Cloud. So if you go to free trials, it's probably not going to show me anything because I'm already logged in. But if you select PTC Cloud, okay, well, this would be exactly what you'd see there. So under PTC Cloud, all you have to do is you have to sign up for your account, for your ThingWorks account, and just access the free 30-day hosted trial. This would give you access to a full ThingWorks server, no installation needed. You just access it from a web page online, which has been allocated to you. It's fully featured for 30 days. So this is probably the most powerful option that you could use if you want. PTC Cloud is pretty recent, so it is experimental, but we found it pretty stable for our purposes. The other option that you have, and for this, I'm going to need, like, there's a feature on your screen where it says show hands. So if you would like to follow along without having to even activate this, we can give you a user access on our server, on our the server that I will be starting up right now. In fact, let me start up the server because it takes a little bit of time. Okay. I'm just going to start my server. Just raise your hands if you would like to join on our server. You'd have a few restrictions. We'd recommend that you actually get the full installation better. And most of you, if you had attended the last session, you've probably already got this activated. But if you would rather just follow along with our system, you can do that also. You'll get some access, but you would not be able to. So just raise your hands if you would like to get direct access to this. You wouldn't be able to do a few things that you can do in the administrative mode, but just raise your hand and my colleague Amar will give you access on there. I'm just checking if, right now we've only got a few participants, so I'm sure as people come up, we will be getting more. Okay, so no hands raised so far, so we'll just continue under the assumption that people are working with this system. Let's get straight into it then. Okay, so here, first of all, let's look at what what we did last week, and we just quickly come up to speed. I said I'm not going to definitely go through all the different. Sorry, I'm just going to reshare this. Let me just stop share and share again just to make sure. So, okay, so just a quick recap of what we did last time. We went through a lot of theory and we went out that, but the crucial page here is actually what we did with our experience. This is our use case that we have been working on. I'm going to give you a GitHub link right now, a GitHub link that will tell you, that will also have this diagram, but it'll give you the files that we created last time. So you can just have a quick look over here. This is our fleet that we are going to be modeling for. They're passenger vehicles, delivery trucks, and refrigerated trucks. So those are our three main categories. Apart from that, we've also isolated what are the common properties to all vehicles and what are the specific properties to each vehicle. So we've done that, and we've broadly defined what's our global map view. So you just need to keep this in mind. And like I said, I'm actually going to stop this share and just move back to my browser share. So, okay, so for those of you who are joining up, it doesn't matter if you weren't here last time. We've created a GitHub repository. And what you need to do with this is just copy this link. If you go to github.com/the-assembly and go to the repositories, you can easily find this. This is the most recent repository. You'll see all the older repositories as well. So this is the most recent repository for fleet management. You just need to click on that. And you'll get a whole collection of files. So what I'd suggest is just downloading the files from here or syncing it up as you wish. You can download the files. If you're not used to GitHub, just download them as individual files, and then you can play around with them in the file system. There's a little README for what you can do with this. So just to explain this to you, if you see, there are a few XML files here. Now, these XML files are objects that I have exported from ThingWorx, and I've put up there which we created last time in last time's session. So if you missed it, you can just take the XML values, the XML files, and import them. I'm going to show you how to import them just now. And these objects will be, will be available to you in your ThingWorx server. Okay, let's have a look first of all at our server. Okay, my server has started. I'm just going to refresh. I'm logged in as administrator. Obviously, your server ID, if you look at the server IP, the domain name that's given, each person will get a separate server IP. So once you've come to your evaluation server, all you have to do is start your server, and you have to wait a little while for it. Once it comes to a running status, you'll get a host name and a few different things there. You should copy the password, the clipboard. You should copy your, the administrative password to your clipboard. Administrator is the default username. So just as you saw me doing right now, just to demonstrate again, I'm just going to log out from here. So I started my server, and that's why now it shows running. This takes a while, so you do have to be patient. So once you started your server and once it says running, you should click on whatever host name is here. And this will open up in a new window. It'll prompt you for a username. Your username will be administrator, and the password is what you've copied to the clipboard earlier. So just say sign in. And it will take you to the ThingWorx composer that we had previously. Okay? So great. So once you've done this, if I stop the server, this URL stops being accessed. All of them will be in the format of something.devportal.ptc.io/ThingWorx/composer. So if you've installed that, you can definitely get in on that. Okay, once you come into your server, how you actually install it, import the objects, is you go to this button on the left-hand side, which is for import export. You click import. And remember, we've got, you have a few different options, but you should just take file. There are a couple of options here, entity and data, but you should just take entity for this purpose. Everything else you can leave as it is. You just need a single file. There are other more advanced properties, so you don't need to change anything. You should browse. So I have actually got these files which I've downloaded from my starter. I cannot actually re-import them because I've already got these objects created since I created them on the last subject. But you should just you should just import each of these. I'll just show it to you just for the sake of this. So there's one project, two things that we created, a thing template, a value stream, and a mashup. So you should just import all of these one by one, and then you'll be back up to speed with what we have. Okay. So once you do this, you should click import. It's not going to work for me because I already have an object called the assembly fleet management. But once you do this and you click import, It's going to say import successful, but it's not done anything because it's just, I've already got it. So, but if you haven't, you can definitely do that. Make sure you have these settings and you should be fine. So as I mentioned, I've already got the project open. Now, as mentioned last time, a project is just a logical way of, of creating your ThingWorks things. You should have a project so that you can logically look at that. You can see that all my objects have been here, and I've even assigned users under the project, so they only have access to the objects here. That's one of the benefits, as mentioned, about the multi-tenanted version of ThingWorks. So just to quickly recap then on the objects that we created, our template was the first most important one, and we have that, that was under assembly car. Okay, I don't need assembly user one. Sorry, I'm just going to go back to my projects. Let me just open up. Oh, I should just open it up from here. So all the things that you've created on here will be over there. So assembly vehicle is a thing template that I've created under this project. Assembly vehicle is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. Remember what we discussed about last time was that you don't go ahead and create properties for individual things. Now each thing is modeling some real world entity. So it could be modeling a vehicle, but you want to create a central template that has all the functionality, all the properties that would be in each of the individual things, something that generally maintains. And from that, we'll create the individual virtual things with ease. But you want to put all your logic into the template. So my template is assembly vehicle. What we did last time, we created a lot of properties and alerts. Destination, they're all different types. You can see there, and the values are there. None of the values have been set here. I've created a few. We had an alert also, I remember, but I think this is, oh, it's not on here. We had subscriptions, right? We had acceleration, access speed, as well as, update is available is just a different personal one there that we had created. Just to give you a quick look at that. So update is available was just to update the is available field. So subscriptions are automatic things that execute every time something happens. If there's a data change event or there is some other event that you want to handle. We created a few services. We created a service called Get Fuel Economy, which just does a calculation. We're going to show you how all of this works. Once we created assembly vehicle, the template, we created two things out of that. Assembly car 1 and assembly car 2. So assembly car 1 and assembly car 2, all you needed to do was specify the base thing template as assembly vehicle, and you were fine. You automatically inherited all the properties that you needed. That's over here. And you've seen that we've edited some of the values also because we were playing around with it from here. Normally, in a normal situation, the edge device would be automatically updating that, and we would make these properties read-only. But for the sake of our for our demonstration here, we have been showing these on there. So we have services as well, have been inherited from there, as well as events and subscriptions. So you can see everything that has been defined in assembly vehicle is put on here in an assembly car 2. Just a quick note again about the value stream. The value stream is where logged properties are put on. So some of the properties that we've defined, if you look at assembly vehicle, properties and alerts, you'll see some of them have, if you see last warning, destination, operator, position, and speed are values that have been logged, which means their history is also logged. So not just the current value, but the previous value as well has been logged. So there's slightly different behavior when that comes into that. But for these values that have been logged, you definitely need to use a value stream so that is stored. By default, those are not stored, but without a value stream, it isn't. So a value stream just has to be defined once for the template, and then it's available to all the individual cars. So, okay, so this is just a quick look at everything we did last week. So we're kind of up to speed. I'm not going to take too much time on that. You can definitely, if you have any questions, you can look up the video for the last one. Let me just. Okay, so this is where we got so far last time. This is a mashup. So a mashup is just the web app that we create in ThingWorks, which is readily available. Like once you have this, you can deploy this web app for users to automatically log into it and just recover that. If you wanted to see what the mashup does, you go to View Mashup. Okay, and this is what we had coded. So using the template and using the data that's retrieved from the template, we coded a map that automatically shows the position. Now this can be set up to be done in real time. So if the location is changing every few seconds or every minute, it's obviously changing, but if it's being polled every minute or so, it will be automatically being updated here. We showed last time how you can set up an auto refresh widget, so it looks almost animated. In this case, we've disabled that so that we can work with it. But we've also showed you how these items get selected. So if you see, we had bound the same data to two different items, which is one is the assembly car 1 and assembly car 2. So those are the two items that have been created out of a Thing template. And assembly car 1 and assembly car 2, if we select from here, because we've connected the selection, it automatically selects on the map as well. So you can either select from the map or you can select from our drop-down list. Okay. So that kind of brings us up to speed with everything that we've done so far. Now let's get into building our, expanding on our thing. So I'm going to just minimize this. Click Edit. I don't see the design view right now. Until it's on Edit, you won't see the design view. Let me just minimize this so we have more screen space to play with. That's just the reason. So now you have a full view of the ThingWorks Mashup Builder. Now this is what we use to build these two things so far. So let's start up straight away with one thing you might have noticed. We have two containers here. One, as you saw on the layout last time, we had a responsive container on the left, which has been filled up with a map. So as it expands to different things, it will automatically resize. And we created a static container for our right-hand side, which is going to give us our detailed view. We've created static. You can create it responsive, but static is just. So as you can see, I mean, containers are the equivalent of divs in ThingWorks, and well, they're obviously a little bit more complex. You'll see that later on. But any of these layout elements that you want to add, you should create a new container for that. So you could add a container within the existing container. I could just add a container at the bottom, and it just automatically. By the way, another quick, you do have a history there also. So if you want to undo, you can do it from there. So just done that. Don't try to use Control-Z, that isn't configured yet, but this is how it does that. So my first job here, I'm going to just add on a few different things here. I want to start, like right now I've got a global view. I have the map view, which shows me everything, shows me the two different, shows me all the different, the selection, all the items that are implementing the thing. But I want to be getting data for each individual thing once I select it. So here's how we're going to start doing that. First of all, the space that we have on the right is pretty limited. So we're going to use a tab container. So just go to tabs. It's another widget. So from the widgets, we just drag it and drop it. And remember, it's static, so you can like select your tab and just drag it around a bit as you want. I'm not going to bother too much with aesthetics here. If you look at the Explorer again, a tab set has just been added in the container, and a tab set just contains two elements underneath it, which are just the tabs that you want to fill. So these are completely separate. So only one of these will be visible at a time. That's how typically tabs work. I'm just going to give them some titles just for the time being. We are going to definitely change it. Right now, by default, there are only two. There are only two tabs, but we can definitely expand that later. But I'm going to create that. So when you select two tab names, you will have tab name 1, which I'm just going to set as root history, right? So that'll change that. And tab 2 name, I'm going to just change to, well, we'll put all the stuff which is related to speed and mileage here. Okay. We're not going to be using this continuously. We will be changing. Now, these two create individual containers. So anything you drop into one of these tab sets, so if you drop it into tab set 1, it'll only be visible when you click on root history. And if you drop it into, into tab set number 2, it'll only be visible when you create that. I'll show you how that works on that. Now, one of the things that we are going to do is, like, we have a global map view. I'm going to add another map widget here. Oh, sorry, wrong place. You should always switch back to widgets. And I'm going to select another Google map, which I'm going to dump in the root history tab there. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do first of all is I'm just going to actually, just bind it to maybe the selected. So from here, remember, get implementing things is how we populated the other map. But here, we bound all data to the main map, but we're going to take the selected data, which is basically just the position item. So whichever is selected, and I'm going to just dump it in here. And I'm going to make that, oh, sorry, that's the wrong, okay, I'm going to just close that. I'm just going to take the selected row and I'm just going to drop it into the data here. So this is only the data for the selected item on the main map. And you'll see the difference right now. I have to do the same thing. I have to put up a location field. The location field will show up once you bind data. So I'm just going to bind position from there. So if I go save here, and I go back and I show the, I refresh my mashup. So you can see that whatever I select is automatically, so only the selected item is showing in my map there. But if I click over to speed and mileage, I've got nothing there because I've not added any widgets. But for now, I'll go back to root history. So now for a speed and mileage, you have to go back and you have to select your other item. Now, there are lots of things we can put for speed and mileage. I'm just going to put this, I'm just going to take a gauge item, which I'm going to drop in here. Sometimes it can get a bit difficult to drop from here. If you struggle with that, you can always drop outside the tab, and then you can go to Explorer, and you can reorganize from here. So I've got gauge tab 22 here. I'm just going to drag that and put it under tab set 2. So now it shows up under tab set 2. Let's have a look and see if it's there. Right now, of course, we've not bound any data to tab set 2. So we're not going to see anything. But if you look at, so you've got a tiny gauge. It's a responsive one. So that's why it's not showing up and it looks quite small there. Let's actually, before we do anything, I'm going to go over to the tab settings. I want to expand the tab. Like right now, remember, it is static. I want to expand the height and width of the tab. So the height is only set to 170. So I'm going to set it to maybe, let's do 600, right? And the width also, remember, this is a static container. So that is why I can specify. And the width, I'm going to specify as 640, let's say, right? Let's just quickly have a look. So, okay, so I've got a much bigger, oops, I just dragged that and dropped that. Let me bring that here. I've got a much bigger gauge now because it's expanded to fit that. And of course, I've got the bigger map as well. Okay, so coming back to that, let's go and bind our gadget data. Now, this is where there's another important concept that you have to remember. So far, we did get implementing things, which is a global function for the entire template, okay? But what we need is we need to be able to get the data for the individual selected item. And the way we do that is using dynamic functions. So what happens here is that, we go over to, so we've already got this. I'm going to re-add under entity types. I'm going to go to thing templates, and I'm going to select my thing template, which is assembly vehicle. Okay, so we've got assembly vehicle now. This is what we did last time also when we did get implementing. So if you see the filter, get implementing things is here, but we're not going to use this because we don't want to get data for the whole template. We want to get data for whichever item is bound to the template. For that, it gets bound at runtime. So we need to select dynamic services. Once you do select dynamic services, you get a whole different bunch of features, and we need to get something called get properties, We don't need to execute it on load because we will set up the binding after that. Once we do get properties, get this, we need to bind. So whichever the selected thing from the thing template, whichever selection has been there, it has a unique name as a property. So that would be, for example, assembly car 1 or assembly car 2. So I need to bind the name to the entity name for the dynamic thing template. Okay. Now this means that I am like selecting the thing that is being selected in my map or my drop-down list is automatically having its properties retrieved here. So that dynamic get properties is coming from the individual thing, not from the overall template. And you can see a few different things. Now, one good practice is to see what reminders are there. It will give you an idea of what things are not bound. So it obviously tells us that gauge has not been bound to a data parameter. We know that. And also that it says get properties needs a trigger. Remember, we did mashup loaded for the other one, but for get properties, we need to bind it, we need to execute it somehow. So how we're going to do that is we are actually going to take the selected, if you look at get implementing things, so now there are a few data properties. Get implementing things has a few, like all of the functions do, they've got a few different events that happen after they are completed. So when your get implementing things, which is bound right now to your map and to your data, changes, we want to be able to take, if a selection changes on there, we want to trigger the get properties event. So all I do is I select here and I just drag it up to get properties. Now, by doing this, that's all I need. I have been able to dynamically link my object there. So once I've done that, I can just take the speed property. Let me just find my gauge. I can take the speed property here and just dump it on the gauge. Oh, it did not. Again, I can also do that here in my properties. If I go here and I just say, sorry, I've got to select the gauge. And my data, I could actually just take the data for speed, trying to get properties. So I could just take the speed and bind to data here. Okay. When I do that and I go back, you can see my data there. Now, one problem we have with the gauge, because we set the max value to 100 only, it isn't catching our speed values, which have gone beyond 100. So we should also adjust that just to max value and set it to 300 so that your range is there. There's a lot of cosmetic things that you can do also. Let me just make sure that max value is set. There are other things I want to hide also. So for example, I don't really want a legend on this. I just change this to the legend display mode to none. I can change the title. I can do a lot of different things on here. But for now, we'll just do that. We're not going to go into detail on that. Now, if I come back to this, so yeah, so you got a proper scale. So you can see the speed is there set to slightly. And if I go and select a different item, it automatically retrieves for that. The root history, as you've seen also, obviously we've not really set the root history. We just like set it to the point at this thing. So we've not done anything with root history, so we can ignore that. So now what else do we need in our speed and mileage? Let's go back. Now what I'm going to do here is inside my tab set, I'm going to go back to my layout and I'm going to add, maybe add it to the bottom, right? Okay, now I'm going to show you another type of widget that we can use here. Let's go back to widgets. And we're going to do, now since we said speed and mileage, let's get a proportional chart. Now, proportional chart isn't ideal for what we want to do. I'll tell you why, but for the time being, I'm just going to drop that in here. So again, save, refresh. Let's see how it looks before we bind data. Okay, so you can see there's a proportional chart below, which isn't showing anything because no data has actually been bound to it. So now what I'm going to do is for my proportional chart, I'm going to actually bind the data. So the great thing about this is like, though we bound get implementing things to data, it does also have some inbuilt logic there where if a selection changes, it knows dynamically how to get the selected data. You get selected rows. So if I change a selection on the map, I also get data from the selected row. So either I can do it with dynamic properties, or I can do it from selected rows here. So if I take the selected rows and I just drop it onto my proportional chart. Now, proportional chart can take many different data sources, but we're only going to use one data source. So let's just stick with that. So, okay, so we've got a proportional chart. We need to configure our data fields. So I'm just going to see what to do with that. Data field 1, now that it's bound, I'm going to show my mileage in there. And data field 2, I'm going to take, okay, again, this is not the fuel consumption. Now, these are two properties that are in different units. So ideally, you shouldn't put it in proportional chart, but just to give you a demonstration, I'm going to just share that. We also need to configure some other properties here. There are things like the x-axis. Oh, wait. Sorry, I'm going to just do. We want to show the x-axis. Actually, no, we don't really need to show the x-axis. So I'm just going to get rid of that. I don't need x-axis labels either. See what it looks like for now. Okay, so now when we've got that, I've actually got values here. You can see on the mouse over, it shows the mileage value that we have here and the fuel consumption. But if we go and change it, we'll get a different one. Obviously, like I said, this is not ideal because they're scaled a bit. And there are different values. Your fuel consumption is set to 20 and your mileage is not. So it's not ideal to show a proportional chart, but just to give you an idea of how to use proportional chart, I've just put that in here. Now, apart from that, we've done with this. We want to add a few more things on here. So we've got assembly car here. I want to add two labels to, remember we had two Boolean fields called is available and is en route, which are set to false or true. And there are different ways to control that. I want to give an indication that when I select an object, whether it is available or whether it's true. Okay, so I'm going to add that information. Apart from that, I also want to add the name of the operator, and I want to add the current destination that is there. Okay, so let's do that first. So for that, we're going to use a different widget called a label. First, we'll do that outside of our tab because we want it really visible at all times. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a label widget right next to this bar. In fact, I'm going to need two label widgets. We've got two labels. Don't worry about the alignment, the size. I'm going to show you how you can fix that as well. Let's just go back to the label. It just has to have, we just have to edit the text. So I'm just going to edit the label text and I'm going to call it available, right? So available is there. This one I'm going to call en route. So these are our two flags. Okay. Now these have different sizes. So another quick trick that you can, like, if you want to, auto size your trick. So I can select the one which is correctly sized, and I can control select or shift select. And there's a little button here that says make same size. So when I do that, they automatically fit. Actually, they're still a bit small, so I'm going to expand it manually. Oh, where did it go? Let me just undo that. Don't worry about it if it's disappeared. I will get it back. So I'm going to actually expand the size here en route. And again, don't worry about the positioning either, because there are several options that we have. So I seem to have lost the other one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly find it in my Explorer. So this is PTC label. That's just the default name that's added. Of course, it's always better to give them meaningful names, but for now, I'm just going to keep that on here. So I've got these kind of balanced in there, and they just show up By default, they just show anyhow. So I just want to see, first of all, if they are visible. Okay, so available and en route are there. They're looking a bit off and they're just showing up on there. If you want to fix the layout, again, just to control select, go back to layout. And if you scroll down on layout, there is an align distribute tab also. So you can just do that to control the centers. So that's fine. Now that this is done, I do not want available and en route to show just like as fixed labels. I want them to show based on the property. So I'm going to go back to get properties. And I'm going to take the is available field and I'm going to drag it and drop it, bind it here and bind it to the visible field of my label. And I'm going to do the same with is en route. And then I'm going to save that. Now, if we come back to this, now is available will only show if our value is true right now. So those are hidden by default because neither are they available. If you look at assembly car 2, the available thing is there. So we have automatically managed to put that in there. And again, you'll see our root history. Well, it's actually just our root there. Okay, so we've added these on. We still got a drop-down list. Now, what else do we need? We wanted operator text, right? So for operator text, we're going to use another widget that we call the value display. So you're just going to drag that down. Now, the value display, I want to just bind it to my operator. So I'm going to again go from get properties and just drop it. And I will bind it to, well, I can just bind it to data, right? Once I do that, the good thing about these value display widgets also is that they come with their own labels. So, you know, like what the value means, I can just actually edit that here. So the label alignment, I can just directly say this is going to be a value of, wait, this is my operator, right? So I'm going to say driver. So, and with a semicolon so that it just automatically fits in there. You can align it in many different ways. We're not going to go into that. But if you go back, if you set a driver value, oh, right now it's not showing there because it's actually, when it's a, this is a unique feature of that if you don't give it enough space, it expands on that. You can even set it to show more, but we can easily fix this situation by just doing just dropping that in and just dragging it here. So I'm just going to give it some more space. We might need to move our tabs down a bit. So for that, I'm just going to, you know, increase the top of the tabs. It's at, you know, again, remember these all in pixels. So I'll just set it to 300. So we have a little more space there. So if we do this and we go back, so we've got a driver and, you know, if we switch over to here, we see the other things. It's available and the driver is John Doe. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm actually just going to, you know, you can actually copy and paste also here. I'm not sure it'll work without in a static. I think you need if I did this, oh, oops, just paste it back. And I'm going to paste a copy. Sorry, again, like I said, you can either use the visual canvas or you can use this thing. So I've got a second value display. I don't know where it has disappeared. It's just one over the other. So that's why it gets a little bit. So again, I'm just going to do my same magic with the layout and align centers so that it looks fine. We come back to that. Obviously, we don't want to call this. We're going to call this our destination. So let's change the label. So we've got destination, and I'm just going to drag the destination field and drop it there and bind it to data. So let's see what it looks like. So like we had set destination to Burj Khalifa, it just automatically puts it on there. We had set no destination here, so it shows up none. You can also set your values. You know, if you there is a nice property here that that allows you to. I think it's like if no value. Yeah, text if no value. So if the value is blank, you can just give it a label that it sets to there. So I'm just going to save that. And now if you go back, you'll see destination set to none for assembly car 2. Okay, so when there's no value, it just sets to destination 2. So we've done all this. Let's go back to our tabs. Now, 2 tabs are really not enough for the amount of features we want to put it in. So I'm going to go back to the tab. Let's go to the tab and let's go for there's a property. And you should also see there's a lot of, by default, it's 2 tabs, but I'm thinking we should probably use 4 tabs here. I'll tell you what I have in mind. I'm going to actually get rid of, we had the tab 1. So you'll see the new properties will also show up. It's route history. We've not set it to route history yet. Tab 2, we should set to, I'm going to separate out speed and mileage. Let's make tab 3 mileage. And tab 4 is going to be something we'll use a little bit later on, but right now we leave it blank. It's going to be called history. Don't worry, I'm going to explain to you what that means right now. So let's see if it's updated. Okay, so we've got 4 tabs, 2 of them are bound, 2 are completely blank. So we're getting somewhere there. Now, in the meanwhile, I'll just show you something that that is pretty useful here. Apart from data variables, if you look at this, there are also session variables. Session, you can get all your session information and you can set it. So this is something that is across the logged in session. So very similar to, these are very powerful tools here. But there is also a user extension. So the user that's logged in, all the information that they choose to expose is available as well. So you might want to put in a message, maybe I'll just put this, if I just drag this down a bit. Oops. Let's drag this down. Let's move our 2 flags here. Most of the times they're not going to be appearing, so it doesn't matter. You might have to realign. But what I'm going to do is just add a message here. Let's add another, let's go back and add a value display. Right? And I'm going to call, for this value display, I'm just going to give it the label, I'll say welcome. Just give it enough space. Now, unlike the other ones, I'm not going to bind those to properties that we have. I'm going to actually bind these to a login variable. I'm going to get the name of the user that is logged in. I can probably get first name, but I'm just going to just get the name. Just drop it and bind it to data. And now when I go back, you'll also see a name there. You could also add a logout button. So it looks a bit smooshed there, but I'm just going to expand it so it doesn't. So you've got that. Oh, I think I've kind of. It's one of the problems with drag and drop on a smaller screen here, because we are putting a lot in there. You should probably switch over to using it on there. It does reposition. So I've just added that. Again, the aesthetics are not going to be great right now, but we will get all the data in there, and that would definitely be a separate exercise for everyone involved. Okay, so we've got our data sorted out here. The one thing we did is, remember, we created in the template, we created something called get fuel economy. Now, get fuel economy allowed us to calculate a ratio between the fuel consumption and our mileage, which is an important reading that we did. It isn't something we stored directly, but we calculated it. So it's a calculated value. So that calculated value is exposed by a custom user-defined service that we have. Now, how do we actually get that value back? Okay, we'll again go to a dynamic thing template because we want to get it for the selected item. And we will add another function here from that. The dynamic tab will still be selected. And if you go there, the function that we had was called get fuel economy. Now, the first step we need for get fuel economy is that we need a trigger for it. It has to be executed after some other one. Now, get properties is an ideal trigger because that executes every time a selection changes. So you can set up a chain of events So I can go to get properties and I can go to data properties and I say service invoke complete and just drag and drop and put get for it. And you'll see in your data view here, let me just minimize this for now. You can see our logic flow, how it works here. So get fuel economy is called when get property service invoked is completed, right? So get fuel economy doesn't take any data. It doesn't take any parameters. It just returns a value. And that value is stored under result. So under this service thing, in fact, I'm just going to go back to our tab. You know, we can actually just create another, let's just go back to our layout. I'm going to add another box at the bottom. And I'm going to just put another value widget here, value display widget. Oh, I don't think it's dropped there. Like I said, if you have issues with dragging and dropping, if you face things, you can always drop the value outside and then go to the Explorer and just realign it based on that. I know that if you give it meaningful names also, it would help there as well. So I want to put this into the third container that I have under the tab. So I'm just going to drop it down there. Okay. Where is my value display widget? Now this value display, I'm going to get a bind to the result. Oh. Oops. Okay, it doesn't seem to be showing up there. Have I not selected the item? Ah, I see why, because I dragged the value display to the wrong item. I need to drop it in the last tab. Okay, so now I've got that. And now I'm going to get the result value and I'm going to drop it. Okay, if you can't find the value here, you can always go to the value display and the data property here. And just, oh, sorry about that. Let's just ignore, but I picked the wrong thing. Let's go back to our tab. Okay, so I take the result and I drag it and drop it onto the, uh-oh. I think we've had an error with the dashboard. Let me just see. As mentioned, this is an experimental feature, the PTC Cloud. So sometimes when this message comes up, this means that you have actually got logged off from the server. So you should go back to your server login. If you refresh this page, you'll see the status of your server. So it is stopping. So that is the issue. So we might have to wait a few seconds for this. Sorry about that, folks. Like I mentioned, this is a experimental feature and it does this sometimes. Rarely, but does it sometimes. It's pretty stable otherwise. Okay. You need to wait for the server status to change to started before you do that. After it starts, you're still going to have to wait a little while because it's not directly, instantly readily available. Okay, so it's running now, but if you go back here, I bet if I hit F5, this is another good reason to keep hitting save once in a while because you can lose your changes until there. Obviously, this doesn't happen if you've got your own server. If I reload right now, it will still be saying the connection is refused. It takes a little while to propagate, so you just have to be patient. The same with the application, it will be down right now. Okay, so when you get the establishing secure connection, that kind of means that that usually means that it's going ahead with that. There we go. So just sign in with the same username password. And one of the good things is even though my server is restarting, it'll just bring me back to the same thing that was the same view that was open in there. So I don't really have to change much. So I've still got all my same tabs. I've got the object I was working with. It won't have saved until my whatever I had from my last save. So that's why you can see get fuel economy is missing here, and as well as I'm sure my last yeah. So let me just quickly fix that. So I'm just going to go back. I'm going to add a layout below, and I'm going to go to my widget here. Get another value widget. Oops. The value display widget, and I'm just going to drop that in there. Luckily, it seems. Just be careful and keep saving. My value display, the name I'm going to give it is, this will be my fuel economy. So it's miles to, or no, sorry, it's kilometers to gallons, right? Let me just hit save. Okay, I'm going to go back to my data, dynamic services, and this has already been done, so I'm just going to quickly do that. I need to set a property for that. So I'm going to take service invoke complete for get properties. So that sets up a chain. That means as soon as service get properties is completed, get fuel economy is the next one. And from the return data, just going to take the result and just drop it here. And just bind it. I've got that. So if we go back to our mileage, sorry, this should actually have gone in mileage, shouldn't it? So if you look at this value, it's here, and it gives you the result, so 20.4. It's not properly sized, but no matter. We are going to actually change over from here. Remember, I was saying that we should also change this size here. You can always go in your layout. You can go back to the container. You can select the container that you've got and change the size. Actually, we've got a separate tab here right now, so we should reorganize anyhow. So I'm going to go back to the Explorer. And I'm going to drag this. I'm going to drag the whole container to including the proportional chart. Like we can leave the container. I'm just going to drag it here. And I'm going to drag the value display also down here. So now if we go back, so everything is under mileage. Our value is there. Oh, it's not showing the. It's actually gone to the side because we've not put a separate container, but we can quickly fix that. It's not an issue. I can delete one of these containers. It's just hitting delete is good enough. And if I come back to this tab, and then with it selected, I go back to layout. I'm just going to add a container below, right? I'm just going to take out the display so that it is saved elsewhere. Again, it's too small, so I'm going to do one thing. I'm just going to make that a static container so that we can control it a little bit more. And I'm just going to, in a static container, I can resize my objects as I want. So let's just do that. Anyhow, we just wanted to fill the whole space. Great, so we've got all the direct data that we want to show here. We can also do a few different things here. We can change the height for the value display. You'll notice also the value display is coming. The value format is 20.4, but you can also customize how it shows. There are different ways to, in case your value is, there is something called a value format renderer. So you can use different formats for this. Like if it's, you have to first actually put your value type. So you can say that it is in, we don't want to say integer because it does have float value. So we'll say, you know, and you can do this as strings, but what we want actually is the number type. So let's just use number. And you can see all that. You can give a few different formats. We just want 2 digits. Once we do that, and we go back, so in case we want more detail, oh, I don't think I saved it. Oh, I did save now. One thing that's very important with these, you know, unless you actually, you know, say done, it will not save the value. So you have to be very careful with that. So if two digits are available, it will show that. We can definitely do more on that. Anyhow, that's a pretty cosmetic thing, so let's not worry about it now. So now you can see it's got 2 digits, 20.40. Okay, so we've still got a lot of stuff. Let's start looking at more, you know, under speed, we've got one space open. We want to show actually, let's start looking at how we can get, so we remember we talked about the logged properties. So we had our speed was logged. So we had a history for speed. We had a history for our position. We had a history for destination. We had a history for warnings. And so there are many values, and we want to give that also in the dashboard. So far, we've only shown how you show the current values. For speed, for example, we want a chart that shows how the speed has varied. You know, it could be, obviously, it'll be in different ways. So I'm going to actually drop a line chart in here. Let's go back to widgets. Line chart is another widget that you use quite often. So let me make sure I'm dropping it in the right place. It should be in speed. So we've got an empty container there. So we've got the line chart. Now, what do you want to bind to this line chart? Don't worry about that for now. Let's just make sure it's there. Okay, so we got the line chart. It's showing nothing because we've not bound any data to it. Now, for the line chart, we're only going to use one series. We only want to show a series. You know, you can show multiple different series. So I'm going to force the number of series to 1. For the line chart, we have to bind some data. Now, for getting the data that we want, we have to actually call a function called query property history. Okay. Now, query property history is another, it's going to be again a dynamic function, but query property history is going to allow us, oh, sorry, wrong place. Let me just save, just to be safe. We just go back to the list of our dynamic properties. And under there, we go to query property history. Now, you'll see a whole bunch of query functions. We are going to use some more of these, but query property history is going to allow you to do the most, you know, to get all your data back. Very similar to how get properties lets you do it for that. So we just add it on there. Again, we need to make our invoke change. So I'm going to go to get fuel economy, go to service invoke change, and just call that, so that after service invoke changed, so the, you know, get fuel economy is called, query property history will be called as well. Okay, so query property history takes parameters also. You can specify the end date. You can bind it to like a drop-down list with you know, and you can do all sorts of things with that. But we're just going to keep the default data. Now, you'll see only the logged properties that we have are shown here. So we've got destination, last warning, operator position. This is all coming, remember, from the value stream. So we just take all data and we drag it. Again, a few trouble. Probably I need to be better with my mouse. I'm just taking all data and I'm just going to bind it to the data. Oh, sorry, wrong one. You can see Google Map is selected there. I need to make sure line chart is selected. I'm just going to dump it to data there. Now, once you do this, again, data fields will be open, available for you, right? If I just go back and I hit save and I see what it looks like, it has no idea what to map, so it will still not show up. It's just got a generic x-axis and it's just got something in there. Okay, so let's bind the data field for our chart. Once you do this, just going to hit refresh. Sometimes there's a little bit of a glitch in the online interface where it just stops there. Okay, so let's go back to our line chart. Let's go to the data field. So you can see now data field has got a drop down. I just want to match our data field to speed. So speed is the data field that we will be using. Apart from this, just trying to think what else we can change. We can change the title. There is a title also for the map. It says line chart right now. Oh, sorry, have I got? Am I picking the wrong one? So I want to pick, oh, sorry, it's actually the label. So there are a few different things that you can, so here, instead of this, I'm just going to say speed history. And I'm going to set the label. I think we've got everything on here. Change title, maybe the width might need to be a bit of, they might need a bit of adjustment. Let's refresh, see what it looks like. Okay, you've seen like, because it's responsive, I think it's automatically become a lot smaller. I know what's missing here. I've actually specified the speed, but I do not need to also specify an x-axis field. Now, query property history will actually give you, and I'm just going to try to find that. Query property history gives you a timestamp by default also with all the data. And you can see this if you just run the thing. So the x-axis label, so the x-axis field, I want to take it as my timestamp. So this is going to be my data versus my speed versus my timestamp. So then if we go back, let's look at it. So you can see all the values, and you can do a lot of customization. Like it isn't the prettiest looking thing, but you can see the speed there that is automatically. So this has got the historical values. Now what we also want to do is, remember, we've called it route history. So I want to do this for the map also, right? So the map can also be bound to a history. So remember, our map properties are also there. So again, we take the data from query property. So let's select the map first. So under here, I go back here, let's go to the return data, right? So from query property history, I'm just going to take all data and I'm just going to bind it. Oh, again, let me just select the object here. So I'm going to take the data that's returned and just bind it to the data for my map. Right now, don't worry about this. There was an existing binding, but we're going to just replace that. Yeah. So once we've done this, let's see what it does first. Okay, our map is really zoomed in here, but it's not actually yet bound there. So we should just check. So query property history has been mapped to here. I need to actually specify, did I select? Oh, I think I bound it to the wrong data. So, okay. Things is bound to this. Okay, so I've actually made up, so this is where the history is actually quite useful. So I'm just going to undo that last binding. So we want to bind it to Google Map 21. This is why it's a good idea to actually put in meaningful names. So I'm just going to take the data from query property history and just drop it onto the data. Replace the binding. Let's have a look. Okay, it's not bound to anything right now. Let's make sure our location field, which is already set, we can. So location field is position. There are also a few options we want to set. So let's actually, let's enable location selection. We don't really need these two features. And I want to make sure, oh yes, there's a property called show path between markers. I want to make sure that is selected on there. Okay, so if you remember, we haven't really set any values. So right now it doesn't show much. And if I just zoom out, it just sets. But if we go back, let's go back to our assembly car 2. And I'll just give it a slight nudge. We do this. Let's refresh. So it first goes to there, but assembly car 2 doesn't have a, car 1 doesn't have a history, but assembly car 2 now automatically shows you a start and end point. So we've got our root history on there. Okay, so this is a quick way of doing a root history also. We can show it in there. We've pretty much got everything that we want. We only have to fill up our history properties. Now history, how we're going to do that is history is just going to show a table of all the properties. And how we do that, I'll just show you. Let's get back to our fleet dashboard, right? So we go back to our history here. So we do get logged properties. So I'm going to add another dynamic function which relates to this. So if I just go here, let's go to get logged properties. Now what this does is it gets a list of all the logged properties which we have like selected on there. So I'm going to do that. Done. Again, I need to set up a chain for that query property history after that service invoke complete. Let's do get logged properties. Now I want to bind this to something. So I'm going to again get a drop down list and just drop this in here. So this is our drop down list. I'm going to bind what's returned, all the data to our drop down list. And again, because it's a drop down, I need to specify a field. So the display field is the name of the property, and the value field will also be the name of the property. So we go back here. Now you can see all the list of the properties. It's not doing anything, but you can see all the properties that are on there. Now, what we want to do is we want to create, I'm going to actually first, let me just create another container below, right? Don't need the drop down to be that big, so I'm just going to do that. Now, I'm going to drop a smart grid here. Well, actually, sorry, a grid advanced is the one, not bound to any data. What I want to bind to this is that when I select a property, it should automatically pick that. So I'm going to add another function here called query. I'll just show you that. Query string property, because I want to only see the string properties. Okay, So I've got the string properties. That reminds me, under get log property, I'm going to add a parameter. I want the type. I want the type of property to be only string properties. Right? So if I do this, save this again, and I go back, if you look here, you are not going to see speed and position because those are non-string properties. This is showing me only the string properties. We've already taken care of those, so that's good to exclude here. Now, how do we actually bind the properties here? So I've got the function called query string property. And don't worry about it if it's not, the way I want to invoke this is when the selected rows change here, I want to call this query string property function. So when the selection in the drop-down list changes, query string properties will be put in there. And then I want to take the all data and just dump it here. Oh, again, it's not. Let me select. Let's just drop it in here. Right? So we've got it bound. Let's save. Now, when we go back, now if you select destination, oh, it's not bound yet. Why is that? Because I've not set the parameter. I need to actually get the parameter. So I want to get the selected text from here, and I'm going to dump that as a parameter as the property name for which the function is to be executed. So now if I come here and I select destination, oh, did I hit save? So my property name is bound here. Oh, I can see there are some reminders here. I should definitely, reminders tell me that, okay, that's meaningless, this thing. Okay, I can see I've done a binding loop somewhere. So I have to, something has gone wrong here. I can see why. Because I did query string property, I should not do that. So I'm going to disconnect this. You should always look out for these things. I should have done that from, from the, so I want to call my query string property only when actually only when my drop-down thing is, I should take it from here. So when selected items have changed, I just drag that and drop it here. Okay, that should fix us up. So this shows us our properties here and whatever we want to change. So you can see all our warnings. You can see the operator history, everything. So we've automatically directly got that. Okay, this is great. So we've got everything connected on there, but we're going to go back to the data modeling quickly for 1 second. Because remember our structure, if you look at our fleet diagram, we've only really done regular vehicles. We want passenger vehicles, delivery trucks, refrigerated trucks. So let's have a look at our data inheritance diagram, right? So we've got the assembly vehicle, which is what we've already created. We want to create a passenger vehicle. A passenger vehicle is the same, only it has a number of passengers and a max passengers, and it can be dispatched. Truck is the same as a normal vehicle, only it has an additional load, which is a property for weight. And refrigerated truck is a specific type of truck, which has a temperature as well. So let's go back to our data. So let's go to assembly vehicle. So I want to create a new, a few new types of, and I'm going to make sure I set my, oh, sorry, here's my, yeah, there it is. Assembly fleet management. Oh, no, I don't want a new project. Let's go back to that. So let's go to new. I want to create a new thing template, right? My thing template is now going to be called, I want to create two basically. First, I want to create assembly truck. And my base thing template for that is my assembly vehicle. Easy peasy. So we just do that. You get all the inherited properties, but I want to add one more property here, which is load. That is a number in kilograms. It should be persistent. We decided that last time, and it should be logged. So we'll have a log of all that. Great. So we've got load on there. Let's go back and let's create another template, which is our assembly. Thing template. Sorry, wrong here. We're going to call it assembly passenger vehicle. Same base template is again assembly vehicle. Save. We can do our properties here. Let's add a few properties. We're not going to actually show you much with these properties, but we'll just do this for now. Passenger. Max passengers is just an integer. So I'm going to do that and create another one, which is number of passengers. So the max passengers could obviously change also. Oh, I forgot to. And I'm not going to really bother to log these. I'm just going to have them as this thing. In fact, one thing I missed here is I should make sure that it's persistent. As we mentioned, persistent allows it to stay constant beyond the thing. So we've already created two things. Now, what I want to do for, like, if you go back to the diagram, in our data inheritance, for the refrigerated truck, we need a thing shape called refrigerated. Now, refrigerated just means any object that has a temperature. It could be a machine. It could be something else. So we can reuse a thing shape. Thing shape actually gives us a behavior. So let's go ahead and let's create a thing shape. Right? And we're just going to call it refrigerated, right? Refrigerated, you see it doesn't have a template, so I just say save. And my properties, I'm just going to add that it has a temperature, which is a number. Persistent, you can set it to logged, but it'll only be logged if that object actually has a value stream. So just be careful of that. And we'll say this is in degrees Celsius. Done. So we've created a thing shape called refrigerated. Now, how are we going to combine this? If you look at that, we are going to use refrigerated thing shape as we're going to create a new template called refrigerated truck. Okay, so let's go back. Thing template. So let's go and call it assembly refrigerated truck. Now, this is not going to get directly from assembly vehicle. We're going to get it from something else that is pulled, which is the assembly truck, right? So this is, you can see there are two levels of this thing here. But right now, we don't want to add the properties for temperature and all here. I'm just going to go and I'm going to say implement the shape refrigerated. And when we do that, if you look at the properties, you have all the properties for common. You have the temperature from here as well as the load. So you have everything under your refrigerated truck. Now, once you have this, you can go ahead and create a thing out of it. So I'm just going to call it maybe, say, assembly RF truck, right? RF truck 1. Same way under assembly passenger vehicle, I'm going to go ahead and create a thing called assembly PV1. So if you look at my two things, I've got the properties. I can do the same. I can edit the values. So I can go and maybe, let's just edit the speed and say it's 130 again. Maybe we'll add an operator. We'll just say this is instead of John Doe, this is Jane Doe. We save. Go back here. In RF, okay, in assembly PV1, let's do the same thing. Let's just edit some random values. So say Harry is R, right? So we've got that. We can not be bothered about that. Now here's the interesting thing. When we go back to our fleet dashboard, although these have gone through a different inheritance chain, they are still all inheriting from assembly vehicle. So what happens is you still get them in the list. And though we've not filled up a lot of values, you can see a few different things. We've not set up any location, for example, so it's just showing it in the middle of the Gulf of Guinea. But it still is setting up values. So even though these objects are coming through a different inheritance route, they can come in here. If we want, we can even use different dynamic properties associated with that to get the values only for those. So there's a lot of things that we can do. So this was just to demonstrate to you how we can do that. Okay, so this was just to give you an idea about like something that we had missed out on that. I think we've got a couple more things and we'll go through it really fast. The first thing that we want to do is we want to simulate our data here. Okay, so let's go back to properties and alerts. Now, again, I'm going to focus on, so normally, if you had, and I'm just going to try to show you, the ThingWorx REST API, and we've used this in the past, allows you to send functions. I'm not going to demonstrate that again to you, but if you are confused about that, how to use it with an edge device. So Raspberry Pi would have an edge agent, and it could send REST API requests to our server directly, or it could use an agent on there and do an always-on connection. So there are many different ways for doing that. Obviously, in this simulated circumstance, we don't have that. But we do have a certain way that we can simulate the values so that we don't have to fill this in one by one, just editing in here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to create a timer thing. Okay, so I'm just going to go back. Let's create a new thing. We're going to call it simulator. Sorry, a thing. And I'm just going to, we're going to call it the assembly simulator, right? I hope I've not used that before. And now instead of deriving from generic thing, I'm going to derive from something called timer, right? Now timer is a special case of a thing. It needs a value stream. We can actually use the same value stream. If you want to create a new value stream, that's also possible, just to separate out the value stream. So we can just say, just call it a timer value stream, or VS underscore timer to follow our. So VS underscore timer. Let's go back to our thing. I can close this. So VS timer is being specified. You have to specify a user that it has to run as. In this case, we only have one user. Administrator is not best practice normally, but in this case, we will allow it because our server is not in a live thing. The update rate is in milliseconds. So it's in 60,000, so it means every 60 seconds, this timer function will be called, okay? So how are we going to do this? Let's go to save. Now I'm going to go back to where is my assembly vehicle, okay? Now, under assembly vehicle, I want to create a function that generates, that generates random values. Okay, I'm going to create a service, and I'm going to call it create random values, right? For all our logged processes, not for all the practicals, but just for all these. So the rest of it, it's really got no inputs. It's only going to take, it's got no output also, so we can just leave everything on there. I've actually got this already saved, and I'm going to just copy and paste this. Let me just make sure all the stuff is correct. Override. So I have got, sorry. And I'm just going to explain this to you in a bit. Okay, so this is my function. what this does is it sets, of note here is like you want to note the function math.random, okay? Math.random is a JavaScript function that just gets a value between 0 and 1, okay? So I'm weighting that by minusing 0.5 from that, I'm getting a value between minus 0.5 and 0.5. So it varies between that. So my latitude is going to change both minus and plus. I'm giving it a multiplying factor for speed, so multiplied by 30. So either minus 0.5 into 30. You can increase that. You can do that. Same for mileage and fuel consumption, which we just want to increase. So this is just going to change. In fact, I'm just going to call it like, say, update random values. That sounds a bit better, doesn't it? Yeah. So I'm just going to save and continue this. Now, if I execute this function, it would automatically update my values and it would change them around. But just doing that once is not enough for me. So I want to go back to my simulator thing. And I'm going to create a subscription. All timer things, by the way, have a default event. I'm going to call it something like, say simulate values. Okay. So simulate values, make sure it's enabled. There's no input for this. Well, there is an input. Input is you want to find a timer tick event. Okay. Now the timer tick event. So every time the timer clicks, this subscription will be called. So what do we want to do in our timer tick event? Right? We want to call the update values for so I'm going to, in fact, I'm not going to do it for all things. I'm only going to do it for a few things. So let's, this is where autocomplete is a great boon. So if you just do this, under here, I'm going to, what I actually want is, let's take for the sake of argument, let's take assembly car. Oh, sorry, wrong box. It's in search entities. So it'll give me, I want assembly, where is car one? Okay, car one. And we've defined a property for it that we've defined a service that we're going to use. The service is update random values, right? So I'm just going to take update random values. And I'm going to do the same for assembly car 2, right? So just do that. We want to make sure the timer is enabled, by the way, and there is actually a setting that you enable timer on default. So we had checked that off. But something really interesting is going to happen here now. Let's go back to our car mashup. Okay, it's still only got the 2 values. Our timer is going to be, and just to be safe, I'm going to make sure that the enable timer is, I'm going to call the enable timer function. You can disable timer also from here. Now let's go back to assembly car 1. If you go to properties, so you can see the mileage is changing on its own now. Fuel consumption is changing on its own. Speed is changing on its own, and position is changing on its own. And if I go back and I hit refresh, in another 60 seconds, it'll change again. So if I go and refresh this, you'll probably see a different item on my route. So there you go. You can see that it's moved again here. And if you look at the speed, the value is different, and the speed history is also added another item for 1835. So it's going to keep updating. So this way you can simulate all the properties, and then it'll keep on running. You can populate anything. You can give it different properties, and you can see a few things. We've got a few different, I think, mileage values also changing. So you can see 2190, now 190.6. So it'll keep changing. If you reload, we've not set it to auto refresh. You can add that in the same way. So good. So this basically shows us how to do, how to set up all these things. We've got enough values now, so I'm going to actually just disable the simulator. To do that, I'm just going to go to the subscriptions. And disable it so that it stops. And just in case, you can also go to disable timer and just execute it from here. So this would disable the timer and it would stop filling in values. We've got enough values now. Now, we're almost done with our session. We've got a couple more things to go. Let's go back to our, we can close all these. Let's go back to our dashboard. Now, let's work on a few more interesting things. Now we have a few more templates that we've worked with. We want to add a text field here that shows, that allows us to update this destination value. So I'm going to get a text field. You'll see some of these things are actually getting, some of the text fields are ancient. I just want, are being deprecated. They're changing around a lot of things. So this text field will expect values, and I'm going to add a button next to it. Oh, sorry, button. I'm just going to add a button. Again, I'm not going to bother with the aesthetics. Now I've got a button here that I want to, I'm going to call it, instead of label, I'm going to call it dispatch. Now this is only for passenger vehicles, okay? I want passenger vehicles to be able to say dispatch, and whatever location is specified here will be added onto there. But I don't want this button active for every single person, I want it for every single vehicle. I want it only active for vehicles that are of the type passenger vehicle. So I'm going to show you how to do that, right? So the first thing that we do is, we have to go on here. I'm going to create something. You have to look at this. This one section we haven't explored. It's called a function. Okay. Now I've got a function. Under functions, I want to select a particular predefined function called a validator function. This used to be a separate widget, but now in the latest version, they've done that. My validator is going to check whether the dispatch button should be enabled. So let's say, okay. So I'm going to add a few parameters. Dispatch button, which, so I want to use, my validator actually needs a parameter that is for two things. First, if it needs to know that if the property is available. So we're just going to bind the is available property to this, which is just a Boolean value. If something, only if it is available, you can actually specify the dispatch. And I'm going to also specify the template type. Don't worry, we've not bound any of this. What the validator allows you to do is it allows you to get a true or false based on some code that you have done there. So I'm going to just do a very simple bit of code here. Available and template is equal to test to my, remember I only want to do it for assembly passenger vehicles. Okay. So is that all right? I've got to close my bracket here and semicolon. So what this means is that the result will give me true if is available is true and the template is in assembly passenger vehicle. So result will, the not parameter will negate it. So it will give me false for that. So if it fulfills the criteria, if it is available for being dispatched and it is a passenger vehicle, it will return false. I'm going to bind this false to whether my dispatch button is enabled. So my dispatch button will not be enabled if this value, it comes to false, and vice versa. Okay. So let's do that. So my validator function has been added. Let me just keep saving just to be safe. Okay, so there are a few things that we want to, we can hard code the values. I want to take the value, whatever text has come from here, and I want to bind. First of all, I need to set up the data. Okay, now I'm going to add, like we have get properties, I'm going to add another function here called set properties. Okay, so set properties. I'm going to set properties so that I'm just going to minimize all this. Under set properties, So I want to actually, whatever value is here, I want to set it by binding it to, so I'm going to take the text from here, and I'm just going to dump it to the destination. Okay, so whatever value goes in here will be filled into the destination property of set properties. I also want to trigger my set properties only when dispatch is, so when dispatch is clicked, I just bind it to set properties. Okay, so whenever dispatch is clicked, it will call on this set properties function, and it'll automatically fill it in with that. Now, if I go and do this, let's go and refresh and see. So if I click dispatch, it would set properties automatically. But right now, it's doing it without any check. So dispatch is always active. So if I go here and I type Burj Khalifa for assembly PV1, and I say dispatch, it's not going to do anything because we've not bound get properties. But if I hit reload, you see destination is updated to Burj Khalifa. Now, the reason it doesn't update on its own is because we have not actually bound. What we need to do is we need to go back to set properties, go to data properties, and on service invoke complete, we should call get properties again. Okay, and if we do that, sorry, I'm just saving all open entities and just closing things that I don't need. Now, if we come back here and we go here, now, if I go here and I refresh this and I set it to something else, let's say downtown Dubai, and I hit dispatch, it updates and it automatically does this. But this is not ideal because we have defined that assembly car one are normal vehicles or their trucks. Only passenger vehicles should have the dispatch button enabled. This is where our validator comes into. So we take the validator and we take the output of the validator and we drag it to dispatch, and we tie it to the disabled function. Okay, so our button will be disabled if our validator output is false. But this is not going to work until we bind our parameters also. So we have to look at the parameters here. How do we get this? So we're going to take is available from our get properties and just dump it here. So that is directly binding a bool. But there is another thing, which is one thing that we have to see is thing template is exposed as a default property. So the type of thing that you are the immediate thing template can be bound also. So I'm going to take template here and I'm just going to drop it here. And when I go back, so my button is disabled for assembly car because that validator returns disabled as true. But if I go to PV1, okay, I've not set something. Otherwise, this should. I know what I've not set properly. I've actually, I had done this in a previous version, so my function is not defined properly. So I've got the code here. Let's edit the function. And template is equal to this thing. Okay, I think that is the name of that. Just as a test, what I'm going to do is I'm also going to drag thing template to here so that we can actually just see the value. I just want to make sure that it's there. So, it tells me what the immediate thing is here. So it says assembly passenger vehicles. So this should actually be disabled, show disabled on there. Let me just check the button. So disabled is according to the output. I think my validator needs to be, I've not set a, yes, I have to do auto evaluate. So you have to select auto evaluate for that function to get. Otherwise, you would have to trigger it manually. So I'm just going to refresh. And now if I go to different values, assembly passenger vehicle, car, truck should not show dispatch, but PV1. It is not showing that because my is available is false. So if I went and I just set is available in assembly PV1, let's just set is available to true. I can also ditch my, I don't need to bind what I had done with, so I go back to thing template. I had bound it to the text field, which I don't need to do. So you can see I've got quite a complex. So I don't actually need to bind this. I just done it for a little bit of. So I'm just going to remove this. Let's just save this. We go back. So now you're going to see that any car that is a passenger vehicle type and is available. Okay, I've got to figure this out. Okay. Okay, we are running a bit short in time, so I'm going to just come back to this. But basically, validators allow you to actually click on those and get in that. We have one last important thing that I wanted to mention quickly, and I'm going to go through this super fast because I can see we've only got like 10 minutes left. Geofencing. So geofencing allows you to define a region in which you can, in your map, outside of which your objects should not go out. So I'm going to go back here. So for geofencing, we have to do a few different things, and you can follow along. I can share the data also later. I have got, I've already actually defined that. I've defined, so the way ThingWorks uses data, there's a thing called a data shape, and it's got data tables. So data shape, you can just say are like custom records. Okay, so they have, they are, you know, they're like record classes. So you could have, they just define the structure of a table, which properties are there, which you know, which titles they can take. So what ThingWorks does is that there is a set process for showing for. So I've actually already created this, so I'm just going to show you from there. I've created two data shapes called region and region by ID. Okay, so all region has a field definition called location. Okay, location is just a GPS point. So all region is just a data point that encompasses a single location. So we've got that. So this is a data shape. To create a new data shape, all you have to do is go to data shape. This defines a type of record, and all you have to do there is enter the field definitions and add a type called location. Okay, so you can just do that. You can edit region and do that. Okay, similarly, we've got another data type called region by ID. Another data shape. Now, region by ID is a bit more complex. If you look at the things, if you look at the field definition, this is really similar to using a thing template. A thing template is like a data shape, and a thing is an info table in this. So just store. So the field definitions here are a bit more complex. So we've used one. So we've got an ID, which is just a value. This is our primary key that you need to set it as a primary key. And we've got a location region, which is a type of our other data shape, which is region. So location region, I'm not going to do that. So I'm not going to edit any of this, but region ID will basically give you, it has an ID and it has a collection of locations. So it has a table of locations that we can define here. This will allow us to give a shape. So if I want to give a bounding box, which defines my region, I take region ID from there. Okay, so now I've got my data shapes already defined. Let me just make sure that I can, like, yeah, I've not set a project for that. I'm going to create a data table here. Okay, and my data table is just going to be a regular data table. And under my base thing template, my base thing template, it says data table. Under data shape, I'm going to define my region by ID type thing. So, and we're going to call it UAE regions. Okay. Now, this data table is completely empty at this point, right? What I want to do is I want to go over to properties. Sorry, just checking. Okay, we should be winding this up in another 15 minutes tops. So under services, you can add data table entries by executing the service there. If you want to see what the data table entries are like that, you can execute the get data table entries function. Right now it's an empty table, so it's got nothing. Now I want to use the add data table entries function. Okay, don't get confused by this location, by the way, we don't use this. If you want to enter values, you have to create here. So this is expecting, like, remember we've defined location region as we wanted to have an ID, which is our primary key, and we want to give it a list of coordinates. Okay. So I have actually taken the list of coordinates. I've actually got it saved. So I've created a rough shape here for extents, and I'm going to just share this in the chat also so that everyone can see this. Actually, just follow along with me. Now I want to create, I have to give individual locations from here. So I'm going to just copy and paste. You might see my screen going off and on here. I'm going to create a region for the UAE, and this will make sense. You can just copy the values. I will put it on the data as well later. I'm going to just add values one by one. Oh, let me go back to my values. Let me start again. Okay, I'm going to create, my ID is 1, my add location. I want to create these. My screen might flicker right now because I'm just going over to Notepad and I don't know if that will be shared. I'm going to add another value. These look like random, but I've actually calculated these as the UAE's extents. It's obviously not exact, but it's like it's the shape of a polygon with 5 coordinates. And finally, this. So this represents my whole region, okay? 5 location points, and you can visualize this in the thing. So I'm just going to add it. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to execute. This is actually our geofence region right now. It won't show anything, but if we go back to get data table entries, and we run it, we're going to see the value here. Data tag does not matter, timestamp also, but it contains another info table there of location region. Okay, so now your info table has got, now we've created our location. Now, how do we actually visualize this? In the mashup, let's go back to our main map, right? And let's go to our, we have to add our function. I'm just going to minimize this. I'm going to actually add our data table here. So let's do this. This was a data table. So the data table I'm looking for, what did we call it? We called it UAE regions, right? And under UAE regions, I want to do get data table entries as my function. I just mark that and I'll do the execute on load so that it's done when the mashup loads. Let's minimize all these. So the get data table entries, I take the return data here from there and I map this to, not to data, but to region data on my tablet. That will not be enough. I also need to take my selected row and the location region object here. So that's the individual selection, and bind it to region location data. Okay. What else do I need to do? So I've done all the data binding. Yeah. So on my this thing, I'm going to have to set a few other, let's set some values. I need to set my region location field to location and my region locations fields to my, to location region. Okay. Now, once I do this, I also need to make sure that regions can be shown on the map. So once I do this and I hit save, let's have a look at our if you zoom into the area where the UAE is, there is now a region object which blanks this out. Actually, this is not ideal because but I can set the opacity to something else. So because it's just completely blocked it, I'll just set the opacity to 0.4. Once I do that and save, and then you can see it's roughly on there. So it's defined a region, it's been added to our map and it's displayed. So that's pretty much like how we show geofencing, how we demonstrate regions on there. The other thing that we want to do, of course, is like we want to say that if our location changes, we want to make sure that it does that. So to do that, I'm going to create a service called check geofence under assembly vehicle. So I'm just going to go back to services. Oh. Let me just cancel this so that I didn't. And from here, I'm going to create a new one. Now, this function is just something that says, we just call it check geofence. Okay. Now, check geofence is not going to take any objects. It's not going to take any inputs. It's only going to check whether our current position is within the existing thing. And the output is going to be a Boolean type. So it'll be either true or false. And since we have no time, I'm just going to copy and paste this as well. This is the function that I've got. I'm just going to explain that to you. By default, the result is false. The thing that I want to use is not test regions, but I want to use UAE regions, right? That is the type that is the, like I said, an info table is just a thing. So I can get the data table entries for UAE regions and I iterate through them. If there are multiple regions, in our case, there's only one region, but if there are multiple regions, it goes through all these regions and it checks the location. If my position is within those locations, set it to true. So this is a bit cost intensive, and it will, like, obviously if you have multiple things, it will definitely do, it will if you execute very often, but it's fine. We can, for our practical purposes, we can. This defines position, location, and location here is actually the field that we have to check against. So the location is the field within our region that it checks against. So locations is just the value of location region that we've got. and it compares with the location field within that. Okay, so if the location is the contain locations, just checks. And if you want to see where all these are, they're all listed in under snippets. You can see under snippets where we have location functions. So contain location is there. If I just went and did it from there, it would automatically fill in, a default thing. Well, you can do that, but we've already typed it in. You can also do a circular geofence, which instead of a regular reaction just does this. So this is our function. When we save and continue, and now if I go over to assembly car 1, and I go to my services, oh, it's not refreshed. Let's just save so that it refreshes. And you can see a function called get check geofence. When I do this and I run it and I say execute, it says true. So this is returning a true value for my geofence. So it knows that my value is inside my geofence. But if I go to my properties and I give it some other value that is completely outside. So if I, for example, go to 30,66, which is very decidedly not in our geofence, and I go back to services and I execute the function, it will return a false. So our geofencing is working. Our service is working that actually automatically checks in there. But how do we do this? How do we map this? Let's create a subscription under assembly vehicle. In our subscription, we're going to just add something, say we'll call it out of bounds. Okay, so say let's call it out of bounds. Right? So that means that it's outside of this thing. I'll make sure it's enabled. The event I want to do this is whenever my position changes. So I'm going to go back to my data change function and I'm going to say, I'm going to choose the property as position. So save and continue. It's just temporarily saving because we are still working on this thing. What I want to do is I want to call my function. Again, I'm just going to use. Remember, I have created in my code. What I want to do is out of bounds doesn't have anything. So I want to say that anytime the position changes, run this function. So I'm going to call the check geofence where all our logic is contained. And if the check geofence is shown as false, then my last warning is going to be set to me.operator. I'm going to set a warning that says you're out of bounds because your location has gone out of there. So let's just do that. I want to make sure that it's enabled. Now this will obviously directly be available to all things that work with this. Okay, so out of bounds is there. Now if I go back to assembly car 1 and I just go to the properties, I know it's already out of bounds because I changed it. But if I go here and let me just go and edit it, let's just call it, let's just say 31, which is definitely out of bounds. Now it should automatically, you should always save, by the way, first once, because it doesn't. So let's get it back into bounds first. Let's get it to 55, which we know is within bounds. And then let's just go and edit it so that it's out of bounds. Okay, so it seems our thing is not working yet. Let's see why. It is enabled. Maybe I need to hit save just to make sure that the subscription is there. Let me check the text also. Have I used the right fields? E.operator is out of bounds. So yeah, that's fine. Check geofence is our function. Let's check if that's the correct name. Check geofence. I have to make sure it is case sensitive as well. So you do have to be careful. I did not use a capital. So let's make sure that is not. Okay. So let's go back. So you can see that the message now comes, Nikhil is out of bounds, and this is the IP address on there. We could actually create a field, where we go into this. You'll see that that's also, if we go back to assembly car 1 and let's see, assembly car 1, and let's look at our history. Let's look at our last warning. So you'll see out of bounds. We could ideally also set a field. So anytime it moves out of bounds, we could definitely say, I think one thing that we have to do is when we refresh, the data is not refreshed, by the way. So you can see the assembly car 1 is out of bounds, and that is why that warning was put up there. So that's about it. I mean, there are plenty of ways you can continue on this. So if you followed along this long, you should definitely try to do more. Where you can where you can create a property for out of bounds, and we flag it up out of bounds. You should look at how you can edit the style defenses and all everything. So which one is assembly car 1? Okay, no, this is assembly car 1. So by editing to 31.66, I've put it in the middle of Afghanistan. It's not realistic, but there we are. So as soon as it's back, you can see, you can probably have a flag here that you can define, and then you can show a value. But because in the interest of time, I'm going to skip on that. So yeah, so that's about it. We've done a lot of different things. And if you cover everything, you can see we've added a lot of data. We've added a whole data flow, and we've done a lot of different things. So you can see this has thrown my root history crazy because I've been editing manually. Ideally, I should have just used my function, but because for demonstration purposes, we've done that. If you want to have a look at this, get in touch with us. If you want to have a look at the completed application, just drop me a mail on iot@theassembly.ae, and I'll do that. I think that's about it. I'm just going to come back. Let me just stop sharing now. Okay, so a lot of those things you can see there that we have actually completed we've managed. So you can see how powerful the platform is. We've done a lot in 2 hours, and usually if you were to do this in ASP.NET, PHP, or any online web forum, you definitely find that these things are quite difficult to do, and there's so many different properties. ThingWorx has reinvented it a bit with the Mashup Builder. So the Mashup Builder, you can see, is very easy to use. It's very easy to drag and drop and just set up these complex data changes, which is needed in IoT. So if you are having any doubt about this, definitely look it up. We are going to keep on using this. So the next time we do our workshop, this is the one for November. We'll probably do one next time in December, and you can see how we can get on with that. So thank you, everyone. And that ends our workshop. And do follow along. We'll share the code. You've seen the GitHub. We'll definitely update all the descriptions so that you can do that. Bye-bye.